Welcome to the Cheating Confession Reddit channel. Today, I'm going to share with you a real-life cheating story. It will give you a better understanding of the issue of infidelity today and help you be more cautious when it comes to a cheating wife. Let's dive into this story together.
The judge sat with an unyielding expression, his gaze steady as he delivered his decision. After meticulously going over the details of the asset division, he finally addressed Sandra, who was now, by law, my ex-wife. "I award plaintiff full custody of the 3 children and set the monthly amount of child support at $1,200,000, he said emphatically. Sandra leaped to her feet at his words, throwing her arms around her lawyer in celebration before turning to me with a triumphant smirk. "Excellent," I whispered to my attorney, allowing a faint smile to cross my lips. You might find it puzzling that I'd feel any sense of satisfaction after such a ruling, but let me unravel the story for you, starting from the beginning, the day I first encountered Sandra. My name is Jack Ulrich. I'm a 46-year-old mechanical engineer, and this tale begins when I was 28, attending an automotive exhibition. I was examining a motorhome, taking in its intricate design, when I sensed someone standing behind me. Turning around, I found myself face to face with a striking young brunette, her eyes fixed on the vehicle's details. "Pretty roomy, isn't it? Almost like a compact apartment on wheels," I remarked with a smile. She laughed softly and replied, "Probably a lot more affordable too, considering how rent keeps skyrocketing." In that instant, her warmth and charm captivated me. Summoning my nerve, I extended my arm. "Care to explore this mobile home further?" "I'd love to," she answered, her smile bright enough to thaw the iciest day. She slipped her arm through mine, and together we ventured to the kitchenette, admiring its compact propane stove and refrigerator. "Well, darling," I joked, adopting a playful tone, "I do enjoy cooking, but I'm not sure how well I'd manage in this tiny space. Would meals on the go work for you?" She shot back with a mischievous grin. "Only if you don't mind the occasional drive-through dinner, sweetheart." We moved on to the cramped bathroom, inspecting it together. "Functional enough to stay clean," I observed, "but not ideal for sharing showers." "A fair point," she quipped, laughing. Finally, we arrived at the bedroom. Before we could discuss it, a salesman approached us with a grin. "Thinking about buying this beauty? Plenty of space for you two, and maybe a kid or two down the line," he suggested with a wink. "Hold on," I responded with a chuckle. "We're just scouting options for our honeymoon. Kids are a topic for another time." Sandra added with a playful smile, "Though we could get a head start right here." We laughed, and she handed her camera to the salesman. "Would you mind capturing this lovely moment for us?" she asked sweetly. The man eagerly obliged, snapping a few pictures of us, even insisting on a kiss for the camera. We obliged with a light peck, more for the fun of the moment than anything else. After thanking the salesman and exchanging pleasantries, we returned to the bustling exhibition floor. My thoughts swirled with intrigue about this enchanting woman. Yet, before I could suggest a coffee or something similar, I realized I didn't even know her name. "Hi, I'm Jack," I said with a grin. With all the excitement, we forgot proper introductions. "Jack, it's nice to meet you," she replied, though her tone carried a hint of detachment. "I'm Sandra. For what it's worth, this is a refreshing change. My boyfriend's a bit of a minor celebrity, and engagement talk usually makes him vanish into thin air." The mention of a boyfriend was disappointing, but I decided to take a chance. What harm could come from a simple cup of coffee? "Would you like to grab a coffee?" I ventured. To my relief, she agreed, and soon we found ourselves seated at a table in the food court, steaming cups of coffee in hand. We talked for over an hour, sharing stories about our lives. Sandra, then 25, had recently graduated with a degree in communications and was settling into her first job. She told me about her boyfriend, Esteban, a relationship that had begun in college. "He's great in many ways," she admitted, "but he's still living like a student, committed to his friends, his job, and partying. Long-term planning doesn't seem to be his thing." "That's a shame," I said, though my empathy was far from genuine. The mention of Esteban seemed to sour her mood, and she soon excused herself. Before leaving, however, she took my business card, my phone number hastily scrawled on the back, and promised to stay in touch. On my way home, I berated myself for steering the conversation toward her boyfriend. Instead of making a stronger impression, I'd reminded her of his shortcomings. But I hadn't lost all hope. 2 months later, as I sat at my desk on a Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Hello, Jack. It's Sandra, your fiancée," she teased, her tone playful. Well, I was starting to think you gotten cold feet. I was about to call off the wedding," I joked, though my laugh was a little strained. "Any plans tonight?" she asked, a touch of hesitation in her voice. "Could you make time for your bride-to-be to grab a drink or two?" Feigning deliberation, I replied, "Let me check my planner. Is it Jenny's turn? No, we broke up months ago. Wendy, maybe? Oh, wait, I forgot to call her last month. Looks like I can squeeze you in between Deborah and Diana." "Diana, huh? What time are you meeting her?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Suppressing a chuckle, I said, 7. "Diana, my mom. It's Thanksgiving dinner. Think you'd like to join us? A month's notice should do, right?" "You're insufferable," she retorted, laughing. "Fine, it's a date." That evening, we met at a nearby pub. The place wasn't extraordinary, but the company made the night enjoyable. Drinks flowed, and the conversation was lively, though it often veered back to Esteban and her frustrations with him. Sandra laid out her aspirations, articulating her vision for advancing her career over the coming years. She also expressed a heartfelt desire to have children, dedicate herself to their early upbringing, and eventually re-establish herself professionally. In sharp contrast, Esteban depicted a life of indulgence, marked by wealth and relaxation, where parenting was little more than an afterthought. Over the past 4 years, Sandra had invested considerable effort in trying to guide Esteban toward maturity, hoping to awaken a sense of responsibility within him. Regrettably, her efforts yielded no results. Their disagreements grew more pronounced, especially as Esteban stubbornly resisted the idea of living together, clinging instead to his independent, carefree lifestyle. Sandra, fiercely competitive by nature, began to feel a bitter sense of failure. Yet, she maintained her poise, knowing she had done all she could. My own excitement for the evening evaporated shortly after it began. I listened attentively as she vented her frustrations, offering what support I could, though I couldn't help but feel relieved when she finally signaled her readiness to leave. While we waited for a cab outside the pub, Sandra unexpectedly proposed that I spend the night at her place. Her gestures and tone left no doubt about her intentions. I wasn't naive. It was clear I could easily end up in her bed. The temptation was strong, but her underlying motives were equally evident. This was about retribution. Sandra was acutely aware that Esteban was likely out with his friends, perhaps even with another woman. I realized I would be nothing more than a pawn in her effort to regain some sense of control in their fractured relationship. "No thanks," I said firmly, choosing honesty. "Sandra, tonight was almost enjoyable, but I won't allow myself to be a tool for your revenge against Esteban. Go home, face your feelings, or find another outlet. I had hoped you saw something meaningful in me, but that doesn't seem to be the case." Even in her slightly inebriated state, my words appeared to resonate. Her face reddened with embarrassment, and her expression grew somber. Without waiting for the cab, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing on the curb. To my surprise, she called the next day to apologize, her tone genuinely remorseful. While I accepted her apology, my responses were measured and distant. 2 months later, during a Thanksgiving gathering where my mother's questions about my non-existent love life became grating, Sandra reached out again. "Hi, Jack. It's Sandra. How have you been?" she asked. "Not bad. And you?" I replied. "Good. Really good. And that's partly thanks to you," she said, her voice carrying a note of gratitude. "I took your advice and ended things with my boyfriend last month. Being on my own has given me a lot of clarity." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied sincerely. "Would you be open to grabbing a drink again? I promise not to bring up my ex," she added, her tone tentative. "Tempting offer, but I've got plans this weekend," I said. "What about next weekend or a weekday?" she pressed. After a moment's thought, I agreed to meet the following weekend. All right, next week works, I said. Her sincerity softened my stance somewhat. Don't underestimate yourself, Sandra, I added. You're not just attractive, you're great company. If I didn't have plans, I'd be happy to see you again. Our next outing went well. Sandra refrained from mentioning her ex, focusing instead on learning more about me. When I mentioned casually seeing a colleague, I noticed her tense briefly but relax when I clarified it was nothing serious. She gave me a curious look, but chose not to pursue the topic further. That evening ended with a gentle kiss at the curb before she climbed into a cab. The suggestion to spend the night together came the following weekend, and this time, I found myself unable to resist. As we made our way to her apartment, our attraction became impossible to ignore. Once inside, we gave in completely, sharing a night of uninhibited passion. The following weekend, we met at my place and spent nearly every moment wrapped in each other's arms. It felt as though something deep and genuine was taking root between us. By Sunday afternoon, as we lingered over brunch, my phone buzzed. It was Deborah, the colleague I had been casually seeing. "Hey, handsome, how's your weekend?" she asked cheerfully. Glancing at Sandra, who was wearing one of my shirts, I replied, "Absolutely fantastic." "Mine's been terrible," Deborah said. "Could use some good company. What are you up to later?" "I'm tied up right now." "Rain check?" I said, lowering my voice. Sandra, who was washing dishes nearby, seemed to catch the shift in my tone. "You're with her?" Deborah asked. "Yeah," I admitted. "All right then, see you at work," she said before ending the call. Sandra turned to face me, her expression calm but curious. "Who was that?" she asked casually. "Deborah from work. She just wanted to chat," I replied briefly. Without further comment, Sandra returned to her task. Moments later, we were back in the bedroom, where she pinned my arms above my head with a fiery determination. "You won't need her anymore," she declared. "From now on, I'll be everything you need." Her resolve was electrifying, and I saw no reason to disagree. Over the following weeks, Sandra became a central part of my life. Our connection deepened, and soon we were inseparable. Within a year, we tied the knot, me at 30 and her at 27. The first 2 years of our marriage were devoted to our careers, me as a mechanical engineer at T-Bolts Incorporated, and Sandra as a creative assistant in marketing. We both excelled in our respective fields, becoming indispensable at work. When the timing felt right, we decided to start a family. 2 years into our marriage, we welcomed Jack Jr. into our lives, marking the beginning of a new and joyous chapter. Sandra's time away from work after our first child was born was brief but deliberate. Confident that her career wouldn't suffer, she quickly returned to her professional responsibilities once we secured a trustworthy nanny for our son. Less than a year later, Elizabeth joined our family, a touching namesake for Sandra's mother. By then, our childcare setup was seamless, and Sandra's leave after Elizabeth's birth was even shorter. Believing our family was complete, we were surprised by the arrival of William, our third child. Realizing our limits, Sandra opted for a procedure to ensure no further additions to our household. With 3 children, our family felt perfectly balanced. Although our demanding careers required the continued support of Delilah, our dedicated nanny, our children remained our priority. For 6 years, we juggled the challenges of work and family life, striving to maintain harmony. However, cracks began to form during the final year of our marriage. Sandra's passion for capturing moments of our children's lives in countless photos was a poignant reminder of what was at stake as our relationship began to falter. Professionally, we remained stable, but an emotional chasm grew between us. My feelings for Sandra had never waned, and our children brought us profound happiness. Yet as they transitioned to school and preschool, Delilah's role evolved into more of a household assistant. One evening, while sitting with the kids and Delilah in the living room, I felt the weight of what was missing. Sandra, yet again, was delayed at work. This time, her absence struck a deeper chord. Initially, I attributed her distance to the pressures of work, a stress I understood well. Professional demands often blur the line between office hours and family time, but Sandra's aloofness toward me, contrasted with her warmth toward the children and Delilah, suggested a deeper issue. It was clear that our relationship was faltering. I began to reflect on my own behavior, questioning whether I had unknowingly pushed her away. What had changed? Why did she seem perpetually irritated with me? A recent conversation about a family outing had highlighted the growing divide between us. "The zoo? Really, Jack?" she had scoffed. "Could our lives be any duller? You and Delilah can take the kids. I'll find something else to do." Her dismissive tone regarding an activity our children loved left me deflated. The kids enjoy the zoo. Why dismiss it like this? Why does it feel like I can't do anything right lately? What's happening with us? Sandra didn't respond. She simply left the room, pausing in the doorway of the study to say, "I feel trapped in this routine, Jack. When I look at you, I don't see a partner anymore. I see a warden." Her words cut deeply. It was clear our marriage was at a breaking point. For the past year, Sandra had frequently expressed dissatisfaction with the monotony of our lives, but this was the first time her frustration had taken such a personal tone. Was she contemplating leaving? Or was there someone else? The mere idea of her unhappiness was hard enough to process, but the thought of infidelity gnawed at me. Determined to uncover the truth, I resolved to act. On Sunday after lunch, I packed the kids into the car along with Delilah, under the pretense of a trip to the zoo. A few blocks from home, I stopped in a parking lot and asked Delilah to take the children ahead. Though puzzled, she agreed. I then switched into a rental car I had discreetly arranged the previous day. Minutes later, as I prepared to return home, I saw Sandra's car heading down the boulevard. Instinctively, I followed. After a 10-minute drive, she parked outside an apartment building and went inside. Armed with a camera, I documented her entry and waited, my anxiety mounting. After some time, I decided to investigate further. The lobby of the building was cluttered with an overflowing trash can and a row of buzzers marked with tenants' names. One name immediately caught my attention: Esteban Gray, Sandra's ex. Suddenly, the pieces fell into place. Esteban represented freedom and excitement, a stark contrast to my grounded reality as a husband and father. The questions surrounding Sandra's behavior now had a troubling answer. My heart sank. Sandra was betraying our marriage. Although devastated, I needed indisputable proof. Returning to my car, I devised a plan. Using an old lighter, I returned to the building and set fire to the trash can in the lobby. Smoke quickly filled the space, and I pulled the fire alarm before retreating to my vehicle. As the alarm blared, I watched the building. Within moments, Esteban emerged onto the balcony wearing only briefs. Sandra followed, hastily draping herself in a robe. My camera captured the incriminating scene, confirming my worst fears. As the chaos subsided and they disappeared back inside, I drove to the zoo, my mind in turmoil. When I reunited with the kids, Delilah immediately sensed my distress and steered the conversation toward their outing. Though I smiled for their sake, my thoughts were consumed by Sandra's betrayal. Once home, I retreated to the study under the guise of work. As I passed Sandra, her sarcastic remark only deepened my anger. That night, sleep eluded me. Lying in bed, I wrestled with a storm of emotions. By morning, one truth emerged. The love I once felt for Sandra had evaporated, replaced by resentment and a desire for justice. Any lingering affection had vanished long before that night. The next day, I felt like a hollow shell of myself. Sandra, though aware of my demeanor, chose to ignore it. Instead of going to work, I called in sick and visited a trusted friend, an attorney. Despite living in a no-fault divorce state, I sought advice on how to navigate the end of our marriage as effectively as possible. But I had my own plans. Whatever Sandra suspected, I intended to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions. I hoped my strategy would catch her completely off guard. Within 2 days, every necessary document had been painstakingly compiled and was ready for my signature. Alongside these papers was a restraining order, finalized and set to be delivered together. I acted with precision, transferring half of our shared savings to a secure account and canceling all joint credit cards. When I made up my mind, I committed fully, and this was no exception. With little alternative, I turned to Delilah for support. Delilah listened intently as I revealed Sandra's betrayal. Though she didn't appear surprised, her troubled expression betrayed her unease at my swift decision to file for divorce. She seemed concerned about the speed at which events were unfolding, but I reassured her that, in time, everything would fall into place. Later that day, I arranged for all the locks in the house to be replaced. By the time Sandra returned home, a discreetly parked car with a process server waited at the curb. Sandra approached the front door, inserting her key, only to realize it no longer worked. Confusion flashed across her face as she rang the bell. That was the signal. The process server stepped out of his car and approached her. "Sandra Ulrich?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You've been served," he announced, handing her 2 envelopes. Her expression shifted from puzzlement to shock as he explained the contents. One contains the divorce petition. The other includes a restraining order that prohibits you from contacting your husband or children until a visitation schedule is formally arranged through your lawyer. He spoke with measured professionalism before delivering the additional words I'd instructed him to say. "Your husband also asked me to inform you that your new address is 107 Maple Drive, apartment 204. He suggests you adjust accordingly and proceed to hell." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sandra frozen in disbelief. Her gaze followed him to his car before shifting to the house, where she spotted me observing from the window. Her shock gave way to anger as she banged on the door, shouting furiously. The children were safely staying with my parents under Delilah's care. I opened the door just a crack, the chain still latched. "What do you want, Sandra?" I demanded coldly. "Let me in! This is my home!" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "Not anymore! The moment you betrayed me with Esteban, you forfeited any right to this house. Go back to him and leave us alone!" I retorted sharply. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Jack, please! We need to talk for the kids' sake. I made a mistake, but this isn't the way. It'll only hurt them." "We'll handle this through the courts," I replied firmly. "You destroyed our marriage, Sandra. There's no fixing this. If you don't contest the terms, it'll go smoothly. Now leave before I call the police." I shut the door firmly, silencing her protests. She pounded on the door and cried out, but I remained resolute. Eventually, she left. However, a few hours later, my phone began ringing incessantly. First her number, then another, likely Esteban's. I ignored every call. By now, she had probably read the full terms of the divorce petition. Against my attorney's advice, I demanded full custody of the children, limited monthly supervised visits for Sandra, and substantial child support. I also cited her infidelity as grounds for divorce. My lawyer warned me that our state didn't recognize adultery as a valid reason for divorce, and suggested claiming irreconcilable differences instead. He also reminded me that courts often favored mothers in custody battles, making my demands a long shot. But I was resolute, reminding him that I was paying for the case. Predictably, Sandra retaliated. Her attorney countered with demands for primary custody, alimony, and equal child support. The restraining order was overturned, and we were forced to negotiate shared custody. Through our lawyers, we established a co-parenting arrangement. I was permitted to remain in the house temporarily, but my anger soon led to an impulsive act. One night, I collected all the family photos and albums and burned them in the backyard fire pit. The flames consumed years of memories, leaving only a few pictures of the children. Over the course of our marriage, Sandra had accumulated over 20,000 photographs. I deleted all the digital copies from my home computer, saving a small selection on DVD. When Sandra discovered this, her fury erupted during a heated phone call. She cursed me and vowed to make me pay for what I had done. My unpredictable work schedule made it challenging to stick to the custody arrangement. Relying on Sandra's availability further strained the situation. These missed days became a significant factor during the final court proceedings. 4 months later, the judge awarded Sandra primary custody, with me paying substantial child support. She also gained exclusive rights to the house, leaving me with only 24 hours to vacate. Despite the loss, I had prepared 2 final surprises for Sandra. First, Delilah, who had been my rock throughout this ordeal, left with me. As I loaded her belongings into my truck, Sandra, sitting in her car with Esteban, stormed out to confront us. Delilah addressed her calmly. "Miss Sandra, I am leaving. I've decided to return to my homeland. Working for you and that man is no longer something I can endure. I will miss the children and Mr. Ulrich, but this is my choice." Without another word, she climbed into the truck and we drove off, leaving Sandra standing in stunned silence. The second surprise came 2 months after the divorce was finalized. My company offered me a contract in the north, requiring a 6-month relocation. I accepted, overseeing operations from December through May. As a parting gesture, I paid for Delilah's airfare to visit her family during this period, fulfilling a promise she had long hoped to keep. And so life moved forward, though the wounds of the past lingered. The idea of being away for an extended time weighed heavily not only on me, but also on the kids. Yet it turned out to be an even greater challenge for Sandra. My frequent absences over the past months had already put a strain on her, and now, with the looming responsibility of handling everything alone for 6 months, her social life started to crumble. As far as I could tell, Esteban had never been serious about moving in with her, especially with the kids in the picture. By April, their relationship ended officially, and Esteban had moved on to a child-free blonde who, like him, shared a passion for refereeing. When I returned at the end of May, Delilah met me at the airport, her confidence underscored by her bold attire. She radiated energy, drawing the admiring gazes of other men. She ran toward me and embraced me tightly. "I missed you so much, Mr. Ulrich," she said warmly, her gratitude unmistakable. "And thank you again for covering my ticket to visit my parents." Her words were heartfelt, but I couldn't ignore the sharp contrast between her youthful exuberance and my aging self. Despite my self-consciousness, her joy at my return brought me a certain comfort. Delilah had been an anchor in our lives for over a decade, standing firm during the chaos of my divorce. "I missed you too," I replied, holding her close. The familiarity of her slender frame against mine felt oddly comforting. But as we drove home in silence, the memory of her enthusiastic greeting lingered, leaving me unsettled. Delilah's actions felt unusually forward, given her typically modest demeanor. I recalled how her wardrobe had grown more daring in the months before I left, making me wonder if she was trying to convey something deeper. As someone who had been both a confidant and a friend during my most difficult moments, I felt compelled to address it. "Delilah, is something going on?" I asked hesitantly. "It feels like you're trying to seduce me, and honestly, you're doing a good job of it," I added with a nervous chuckle. Over the years, she had been a vital support system, especially through my separation from Sandra. "We need to have an open conversation," I continued, trying to stay composed. "What's on your mind?" Delilah hesitated briefly before responding. "You need a good wife, Mr. Ulrich." "Delilah," I interrupted, "just call me Jack. You always used to call me that." "All right, Jack," she said softly. "You deserve someone who loves you, who takes care of you, and who's there for your children. Maybe someone who could even give you more children." Her voice was filled with an earnestness that was as touching as it was disconcerting. "I care about you deeply, Jack," she went on. "I don't want to see Sandra hurt you again." "You mean Sandra?" I asked, surprised. "Yes," she confirmed. "Now that her relationship has ended, I worry she might try to reconcile with you." "Would that bother you?" I asked, curious about her reaction. "I've always felt you deserve better," she admitted. "If I married you, it wouldn't be about Sandra. It would be about us. I'd do everything to make you happy, to be a better wife, a younger and more beautiful one, to give you the love you deserve. I've seen your pain, Jack. I've heard you cry when no one else could hear." Her confession left me speechless. The depth of her feelings, coupled with our cultural differences, highlighted the complexity of her perspective. While her honesty was touching, I couldn't be certain if her vision of love aligned with mine. "Delilah," I began cautiously, "what you've said is deeply moving, but I'm not ready to think about marriage again. For now, I'm just grateful to be home with you and the kids. That's what matters most." Her face fell, clearly interpreting my words as a rejection. "You've caught me by surprise, that's all," I continued, trying to soften the blow. I never realized you felt this way. I need time to process everything." Although visibly disappointed, she managed a faint smile at my reassurance. "Delilah," I added, "you're young, beautiful, and full of life. You deserve someone closer to your age. But one thing is certain, Sandra and I won't be together again. Right now, you're the most important woman in my life." 1 year later, Delilah and I sat quietly on the couch, my eyes drawn to a framed photo on the wall. It was an old snapshot of my eldest two playing in the yard while I napped in a chair, my youngest cradled in my arms. The picture remained in its place, a relic of a past life that Sandra had even rehung, a symbol of something we both clung to in different ways. The sound of Sandra's car pulling into the driveway interrupted my thoughts. The kids burst into the house, offering quick hellos before disappearing into their rooms. "Hi, Dad! Hi, Delilah!" Jack Jr. called as he passed. Sandra entered gracefully, balancing grocery bags as she made her way into the kitchen. "Sorry we're late," she said, her voice still carrying the charm that had once captivated me. Delilah stood to check on the kids, leaving Sandra and me alone. "You're looking good, Jack," Sandra remarked, her tone tinged with nostalgia. "Every time I see you, I realize how foolish I was." "That's true," I replied with a dry smile, "though I had a little help opening your eyes." Sandra chuckled softly. "If I didn't still care for you, I'd probably be upset at how you handled things. But deep down, I know it turned out for the best. He would have left me eventually, but it happened sooner because of the kids." "I wanted to hurt you," I admitted. "And you succeeded," she replied. "But I can't blame you for wanting me to feel the pain I caused you." At that moment, Delilah returned, her glowing face betraying the excitement of her impending motherhood. The kids followed, their overnight bags packed. Sandra and Delilah shared a warm hug. "Take care of them, Delilah," Sandra said. "I will, Miss Sandra. I'll make sure they're well cared for," Delilah reassured her. As we drove away, I found myself wondering about the life I might have had if Sandra and I had stayed together. It was a question riddled with regret and impossible dreams. Yet, as I moved forward with Delilah, my new wife, and the soon-to-arrive daughter we were expecting, the weight of the past felt a little lighter. Life, after all, moves on. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.